Welcome, everyone, to my Day in the Life video series where I'm interviewing lots of different professionals to learn about how they help students succeed in the classroom and at home. Today, I have with me Tabitha. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi there. I'm Tabitha Macheski, occupational therapist. I work in Roosevelt School District in South Phoenix, in Arizona, and I work with anywhere from 2 years, 8 months, preschoolers up to eighth grade.
Okay, and are you contracted with the school or do you work directly with the school district? Independently, do you work? How does that work?
I am a district employee.
Okay, and you do preschool as a district employee as well?
I do, yes.
Okay, because that's here in New York State, that would normally is not the case. It's usually two different providers. Um, and what made you go to occupational therapy? What made you pick that career path?
So I initially was a music therapist. I still am a board certified music therapist. I did that for about 10 years, and then the state of Arizona went through some changes. And at that time, they were changing how they were providing music therapy services. And so I was going to be taking quite a pay cut and maybe not being able to provide the services the way we were as home based. And so I decided to go back to school. And the one thing that fascinated me the most was sensory processing. And I wanted to know why and how, which is really why I got into occupational therapy, went back to school, and I've been doing this in Roosevelt District for 8 years now.
Okay, great. Oh, this is interesting. I love when people have different careers before they start, which is not that uncommon, actually. Um, how do you morph together the two? How do you combine? Because I can't imagine that these are two separate. You must bring all that music therapy background to probably every session you provide for your students. Can you share a little bit about how that history that you come with influences the way you provide OT services?
Absolutely. Initially, I had someone when I did a field work tell me, it's just a bag of tricks. You're not a music therapist anymore. And I'm going to say that's absolutely not true. I am both, and I do morph both together. I catch myself singing everything I do when I'm teaching students a new task. When I'm teaching or working on motor skills, I really match my tone and my pitch with what I'm doing. So, say I'm doing a lying down, you'll hear me do it very much with a lying down, where I match what I'm doing so that the students can do that. A lot of times I don't catch myself doing it. I can't really tell you what all I'm doing from a music perspective, joining in with the motor skills that we're working on, because it's just part of what I do and who I
Nonstop,
am.
right? But that's an excellent example of it, of using that. Even me listening to you say that, that was very clear that we were going down, so I could see how it could play an amazing role. And more now, even teachers are incorporating that. You see students learning different skills through song. So, we know research and evidence wise, it can help with memory retrieval as well. So when you're doing that with handwriting, I can imagine that's also beneficial. Um, Tell me a little bit about how many students you have on your caseload.
So we're starting a new school year next week. So I would say caseload is probably starting about 65.
Oh, that's a lot.
But that's shared between myself and OTAs.
Okay.
So we as a district do the team collaboration where we do both treat that whole caseload together. So it's not an overwhelming caseload when you look at it from that perspective.
And it's you with one CODA, or do you have more than one OTA on your team?
So previously it's been me with one CODA. This year where I'll actually have two CODAs working with me. So it's kind of exciting.
And throughout your day, do you have any time in your schedule in terms of documentation? Do they allow for that? Do you get a prep period? What does your schedule look like?
I do have time for paperwork and documentation. I can incorporate it into my work day. So a lot of times I'll do that at the beginning of the day before students get on campus. I do have a lunch break, but I tend to do paperwork during my lunch break, and that's just me. I like to get it done while I'm sitting there. But we do incorporate that time. In my district, our COTAs do not do our meetings, so I do a lot of those. So they do a little bit more treatment than I do. Um, I do a lot more of the collaborative goal writing with my staff. I meet with the teachers and do that consultation piece. Push into the classroom when I can and do whatever sensory strategies we need, trying to help focus on how to meet the students' needs, how to train my teachers and the paraprofessionals on utilizing those sensory strategies, any of the motor skills that we're working on as well. And so because we use that type of a model, I do have the ability to put some more paperwork time into my
Okay,
day.
which is nice, was definitely excellent for you then. It's not as chaotic at the end of the day. You talk
Exactly.
about collaborative goal writing. Can you speak to a little bit more about that and about your process for setting goals for occupational therapy?
We, in I guess where we are, we've been really focusing on trying to write collaborative goals where we're not one profession working on one goal, not just the related services doing
Hmm.
that. So we've really try to develop it. A lot of times I'll meet with a teacher and talk about, hey, what are you seeing the needs of this student? Here's what I'm seeing. Could we work together to develop a goal to address that? What types of goals are you thinking? What kind of needs are you seeing that I can help you address as part of that? And then we can kind of talk about what goals we're looking at, how we are going to address it together. A lot of times it's an email conversation. I'm thinking this. What do you think? And we kind of work towards that before we get into the IEP meeting.
So you're all on the same page. And so am I correct in stating that in your district, you do not have standalone OT goals? You're supporting the teacher's goals, or are you collaborating to determine an OT goal?
We do not have standalone
Okay.
OT goals. Uh, Sometimes we do if there's absolutely something that we would like to write it differently, but the majority of the time we are really collaborating with teacher goals or whole team goals.
Okay. Makes sense. When you going back to the question about documentation, are you using a paper and pencil system? Are you using technology? How is your district documenting?
So we use it's called desktop, where we do electronic documentation, billing of our services. I also do handwritten notes, but then I put them into the electronic
Transfer them
system.
over. Okay. And is it when you're writing your goals, is it from the start of the school year till the end of the school year? Or is it whenever that child initially gets evaluated? So their goals might be from February to February, or most of them, from you said you're starting next week, August through May or June.
So our goals are a year from the start of the IEP.
Okay. And for progress monitoring quarterly, do you have to report or trimesters? How are you set up?
We're on a trimester system, so we progress report once a trimester.
Okay. And in terms of your frequency for OT, is there an average time that you're seeing most of your kids?
Um, Honestly, it depends on student needs. And so we look at that and decide. I'd say a lot of times we have 60 minutes a month, we have 90 minutes a month. I've noticed a lot of students do best with small bursts of therapy. So if a student is 60 minutes a month, we've actually kind of started doing 15-minute increments every week instead of full 30 or 60-minute sessions because we're just finding we get more out of that smaller burst of therapy in the classroom setting because we're pushing into that
Okay.
setting. But it's based on student needs.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought up per month because a lot of therapists don't operate in that manner. It's usually, one time per week or so when you're saying, say, let's use 60 minutes per month, you are allowed to allocate that however you see fit. Just like you said, you have the flexibility of 15 minutes a week if you want, or if there was a student that you needed to front load 60 minutes that first week of school, that's suitable. You're meeting the requirements of the IEP.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, which allows for a lot more flexibility than when we pigeonhole ourselves into weekly. It can get tricky when kids are absent or if a therapist is absent. Do you have better luck in terms of continuity of services that maybe you're able to fulfill that requirement easier? Does that question make sense? Or do you not know any different? Has it always been per month?
We have always been per
Okay,
month, but we were very structured at one point in time where it was 60 minutes a month. Every student, it seemed like, had 60 minutes a month or 90 minutes a month. And we've really looked at it closer and kind of figured out what's best for each student. It really is about meeting our students' needs versus how many minutes should they get and how do we want to service them. So we put in the IEPs, our frequency and duration a lot of times. Um, and some of my preschool classrooms, I really find they do better if I do those small bursts um, each week versus doing 30 minutes twice a month and I've kind of played with my numbers even because I felt like a student needed 20 minutes for therapy session a week. And so now we're 80 minutes a month or I feel like they need that 120 minutes. And so we're going to go in twice a week and do 15-minute sessions to meet their needs. It just really and truly allows us that flexibility of meeting the student where they are and building on that.
now, how are you scheduling that? Like in the start of the school year, or your trimester, do you have to go in and say, I'm going to see this kid at this time, or are you really allowed all that flexibility since you're doing a lot of pushing to be able to go in, when it's best for that kid that week, or how are you managing keeping up with all of that?
We do have a set schedule. You have
Okay.
to have a set schedule. It's the first week. Students start next week for us. So right now I'm meeting with teachers, trying to get a feel of what their schedules, their classroom, um, what students are in their class, where they're going to be. And once we have that kind of a schedule, we're going to really sit down and say, okay, what's the best time of your classroom day for us to slide in and be a center or for us to meet that student where they are and really address their needs? And then we set up our schedule based off of that. And let's be honest, it's going to change
Right.
multiple times, but we really try to work with the teachers because I want it to be a partnership and a collaboration versus me saying, this is when I'm coming in your
Right.
classroom and this is what I'm doing.
Right. It doesn't feel like you're being much of a team player when you're in that kind of an environment. Can you speak a little bit more about, you mentioned fine motor stations. Can you talk about how you set that up and what that might look like if you're pushing into the classroom that time to run a station for a teacher?
So, a lot of times it may be a classroom that's fully self contained, or all of our students are on an IEP. Whether they get OT or not, if I'm setting up a center and we have talked about, okay, this week we're working on this letter, we may make an activity where we're addressing we might do handwriting without tears. So we do the wet, dry, try, and then we work on that formation of that letter. We may make a craft using that letter, addressing what this teacher is working on for that week. A lot of times I'll meet with them and say, okay, what are you working on? How are you addressing this, and what can we do as your OTs to come in and be a part of that center time? It doesn't always work. There are some days where we go in and the whole class is sitting having iPad time because they needed some downtime. So then we set ourselves up on at the table and we take one or two students and we work on what we're doing, that activity that we have, and then they can go back to joining their iPad time while we pull other students. Um, it really is A collaborative
And
approach. Teamwork.
flexibility, is key. You're going with that teacher being the primary role and working off of what's going on in that classroom, it
Yes.
sounds like, which makes a lot of sense. Um, and so when if they are moving through the stations, you're seeing every kid in the class, regardless of whether they're getting services or not?
Typically, yes, we
Okay.
will because it's not fair if they can't
Right, right.
join what
Yep.
we're
No,
doing.
it makes sense. And it's also just very inclusive because then everybody gets, the students want to do most of the time what you guys are doing. I'm a PT, but they all love all the OT supplies. So it's usually not a hard sell. What would you say is the best thing about your job right now?
I love the collaboration. I will say, I personally think we have the cutest, most amazing students in the world, but that's just me being biased. Um, I love working with students. I love the collaboration that I have with my team, and we're lucky in our district that we have such a collaborative model.
It sounds like everybody too learns from each other. You have a good set of colleagues that can be very beneficial it helps with job satisfaction, that's for sure. Um, do you miss anything about being a music therapist? Are there things that you miss about that career?
Um, yes and no. I mean, I feel like I've been able to incorporate it in everything I do with OT using the music. I look forward to this year. I've kind of set myself a goal that I'd like to meet with my music teachers and kind of see how I, as a music therapist, can help adapt some of the curriculum or task for some of our students if they need it. In the past, I've been able to go in, not as an OT, but when I was a music therapist, I could meet with teachers sometimes and adapt the equipment. So, say a child's learning the xylophone, could we put colors on it so they knew what color was related to the music note and then adapting their music with that color as well. So my goal this year is to maybe try and work with some of my teachers on being more available for that as well.
Yeah, and that's definitely an example right there of how do you not incorporate the two. OT plus music therapy, that's a great example of using both of your career sets there. I'm sure it comes in very handy. How about challenges? What would you say is the most difficult part of your job right now?
Scheduling. I think figuring out where everyone is and being able to make sure we're addressing student needs, but still able to do the evaluations that we need to get done, being able to find when students are actually at school if they happen to be absent, and making sure that we're addressing their needs. That's probably one of the hardest challenges. But again, that collaboration, I think, makes it easier to address
To
that.
make it all work. Now, you speak of evaluations. Have you noticed any uptick in evaluations post-COVID?
So I am a preschool evaluator on top of doing treatments. So I feel like we do have a lot of evaluations. And would I say it's an uptick? I think I've seen a lot more concerns with sensory processing and
Mhm.
self-regulation, which is understandable. But I would love to see a research article done at some point in time on parent perspectives of sensory processing and self-regulation since COVID, because it seems like a lot more parents are recognizing those sensory processing needs and asking for support and ideas on that.
Right, and it's hard to tell. Is that post-COVID or is that just more information that parents and all of us are learning more and more about the importance of social emotional skills? I think COVID put that all to the forefront, and we realize it's not just about academics at school. Everybody is realizing more and more it's the whole child, which as an OT, you were probably doing that all along, but not all of us were. And so I do wonder whether it's also just that parents are more informed about sensory differences and self-regulation, and whether we're seeing it there. Is it necessarily that COVID caused it? Not, I don't think it's a cause, but Is it associated with it, or is it just we're more informed as parents now? I think it's hard to tease that out.
Definitely, I
And
would
and
think
the
it's hard.
expectations of parents. I think this is just my personal opinion, but I think it's parenting is hard. It's a hard job. And kids are it's hard to raise little kids. And, sometimes our expectations might be too high of what they can actually accomplish. Like sitting in a restaurant and waiting for, 30 minutes might not be your best choice for a 3-year-old. Not judging parents, just saying, I've been there, done that. I have 6 kids, so I get it, from both sides. But I do wonder there. Now, with your evaluations, do you have time built in for those, or are you squeezing them in, or how's that working?
So we have set days that we do our preschool evaluations. The physical therapist and I have both said, hey, can we make this day our motor evaluation day? So when we're doing a comprehensive developmental assessment, we go in and do like the review of existing data part. Then we go ahead and evaluate the student. So it's set aside as a 2-hour block that we, as the evaluation team, work together to do that evaluation. And then if there's overflow, we might set aside another day for evaluations during the week. But for sure, I'm looking at this school year going, every Tuesday is my preschool evaluation day, and then Thursday is my overflow day
Okay.
if I need it. And then for school age students who need evaluations as part of their triennial, or if they're a referral, first time referral for services, I will fit that into the
Okay.
day. I usually schedule them out a week or two with the teacher and say, hey, I'd like to come in. What's the best time of day for me to pull them out for their evaluation? And we'll schedule it ahead of time, put it on everybody's calendar. And I like to try and let parents know so that we do our best to make sure students are at school that day.
Is present. Now, when you talk about the preschool evaluation, are you and the PT evaluating that student at the same time during that 2-hour block?
Myself, the physical therapist, the school psychologist, the speech and language pathologist, we all do a collaborative evaluation.
And are you doing full standardized? How is everybody getting that full standardized assessment in, or you don't have to do that? Because that
Um,
sounds tricky.
we do the best we can. If
Okay.
this child is able to participate in standardized assessment, we definitely will do it if we can. I find a lot of times clinical observations are a necessity as our evaluation, and a lot of times students, the little preschoolers, can't always do that standardized assessment. The Peabody, they may not be able to really sit down and do every part and piece of it. So we may use it as a clinical observation of
Okay.
what skills they have. If we need standardized scores, we can't do a Peabody because they're not able to follow those standardized um, directions, we may do a DAISY
Okay.
and look at use parent interview along with participating with the student in what they're doing. And sometimes just talking to the parent and playing gives us more information
So
than
you
if
can
I
learn a
tried to
lot.
do the standard.
Right. Now, so after you've done this evaluation with the team, are you all sitting down together and saying, I see this, I see that, or everybody kind of goes off their own way and writes up their report? What happens after the eval?
So we usually will write our own reports, but then we sit down and we talk about the student too, so that we're collaborative with what we think the students needs, what their strengths are, really looking at those strengths and how can we build on those strengths to meet the areas that they may have the needs. And then we come back together as a team with the parent for their evaluation meeting to go over
Meeting.
the evaluation results to determine eligibility, if they're eligible or not. And then we usually also try to write the IEP during that time. So parents only have to come
I was just going
to
to say, this
meeting.
sounds very convenient for parents because doing all those evaluations at once, then having the one meeting, that must be very helpful. Everybody's short on time. So, And having everybody around the table at the same time is always a clearer picture for the student, to establish those goals. If you could share with us, we're almost done, but do you have any success story that you'd like to share about a student you had or a specific strategy you found to be very helpful before we wrap up?
Oh, that's a hard question. um, you know, I'm thinking of one little guy that we've had. I have been with him since preschool. He is a third grader this year. And when he first came to us in preschool, he was 2, 8. And I think he joined the classroom at 3 years old. He wasn't walking. He wasn't really talking, not doing a whole lot of fine motor skills at the time. And here we are going into third grade. He is in an inclusive classroom, going in with his general education peers. Um, and then when he needs his extra learning time, we've used the one of our more functional skills classrooms as his resource time. So then he's working on those life skills, those really getting his needs met in that classroom and going, being in both, being able to use both perspectives. And it's really been fun watching him in this last year. He is starting to write his name, he is starting to use scissors consistently to cut across a line, to cut curves and to cut circles. And he's just flourishing in the classroom. You walk in there and he says hello to every student. He's starting to use his augmentative communication device to help engage in circle time in that whole group learning that he's doing both in general education and with special education. And he is just watching his progress, watching him flourish as a student and grow has just been so amazing.
It sounds like a role model too for other students in the school. So I love to hear success stories like that. Thank you very much for joining us. This was great. And anything else you want to share before we're done?
I don't think so, but thank you so much for having me.
All right, great. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, bye bye.